Welcome back to the blank of Yu Yu Hakusho, where I take an episode of the fairly popular 90s anime Yu Yu Hakusho and put it under the microscope. Explore how it utilizes a specific storytelling tool in great detail. In this second episode, the Sort of Dead Yusuke is looking for a means to return to the land of the living. He's taken to the spirit world and given instructions on how he might return his soul to his body. However, there is a complication. The real world thinks Yusuke is dead, and his mother's planning on cremating his body. No real point in resurrecting yourself if your body is a pile of ash. In order to stop this, Yusuke is given some methods of limited interaction with the human world, eventually accumulating into him possessing the body of Kuwabara to try and get in touch with his friend Keiko. But can he convince her that he's Yusuke and not Kuwabara? Since this episode's story deals with identity, I figure this would be a great time to start talking about character design. This is a pretty hefty topic with a lot of subcategories to consider, and we'll definitely be returning to it from time to time. After all, we've only been introduced to like a third of this show's main characters, so seeing how character design evolves over the course of the series will be interesting. For now, we'll just be talking the very basics of visual character design, specifically shape, color, and posture. Of course, the first question we should probably be asking is, why is character design important? Well, different projects have different priorities, but if you're aiming for something with populace appeal, that is to say, pretty much anything mass media, of which a 100-episode action comedy anime aimed at young boys certainly is, then there is value in making your characters iconic. Marketing value, of course, because nobody wants a toy that looks like Joe Average, but also emotional value. As a narrative progresses, ideally the audience is making emotional connections to these characters, to the point where said emotions can be evoked by that character's mere visual presence. A character that is mysterious and sexy can trigger that, "oh, it's them" response from just a silhouette. Seeing a character or characters you've come to associate with comedy relief can prime you for a lighter tone before they've even uttered a single word. A character that's not visually distinct doesn't have those advantages. If they blend in with the crowd, or hell, even if they're just two characters that look sort of similar, it weakens that emotional connection. This can be a challenge for some artists. After all, it can take a long time to perfect drawing just one body type, just one face. And it's easy to fall back onto that one thing you're really good at. Did you ever notice that a lot of the young girl characters in Studio Ghibli films look an awful lot like each other? The studio, Hayao Miyazaki, the specific animators, are really good at doing this one distinct character design. And that's fine in this case because these characters are separated by movies and are visually distinct from each other in their specific movies. But imagine if they were all in the same film. Your attachment to these characters would be hampered if you had to stop and go, wait, is that Kiki or Shida? Character design can also be used to play off audience expectations. Certain body types have been codified in our cultures to mean certain things. A person who is larger in frame evokes strength and power. A person who is larger in gut evokes slowness and excess. A female character drawn with emphasized curves is more sexual than a character with a less dramatic body shape. You can even extend this to animal characteristics. In Yu Yu Hakusho, one of the teachers, Mr. Akashi, has rat-like qualities, including a long face, smaller, beadier eyes, and buck teeth. Rats typically have negative connotations, and likewise Akashi is a nasty little jerkwad. These signifiers work as visual shorthand, but can also be used to twist audience expectations by having the characters play against what their physical forms would imply. A pretty popular example is Beauty and the Beast. You have two characters, a chiseled beefcake who's one pair of blue pajamas away from being Superman, and a snarling monster who appears to be part bear and bull, dangerous animals that you should stay away from. And yet, their actual characters don't match their visual design. Gaston is a reactive villainous jerk face, and the Beast might put up an aggressive front, but he has a sensitivity and kindness inside him that you would not immediately assume. This kind of surprise characterization is used to a comedic fashion in this episode. Yusuke is being taken to the spirit world by Botan to meet the guy in charge, Koenma. Now, the trip is a pretty big ordeal. The spirit world is a vast plain with a huge castle in the center of it all. Whoever rules a world like this must be pretty powerful, right? We see what Yusuke imagines the king of the underworld might look like: gigantic, monstrous, demonic. This is actually set up for two gags. First, when Yusuke and Botan arrive at the castle, they meet a demonic creature, sort of like the one Yusuke imagined. But then we pull back and reveal that these guys aren't vicious monsters, they're office workers, moving paperwork, writing reports, making phone calls. Their actions are in conflict with their character design. The comedy comes from that juxtaposition. Then we meet Koenma himself and discover that he is not a huge monster, but appears to be a small toddler. He doesn't look all that threatening. His character design does nothing to suggest the amount of power he wields. Even though this little guy is the key to him returning to the world of the living, Yusuke just cannot take Koenma seriously, and there's a good chance you, the audience, feel the same. I mean, look at him, he can't be the ruler of the underworld, he's too cute! Character design is an active part of storytelling because it can convey ideas that the writing can pick up and run with. Again, we'll be exploring these kind of things in greater detail as we go along with the series. There's 112 episodes, we've got time. So for now, let's just talk surface stuff. How do you make characters that are visually unique and iconic? Well, first off, we have shape. This regards most of the basic descriptions of your character, like how they build, how tall are they, thin, fat, center of gravity, etc. And for most secondary and background characters, the buck stops there. But for a main character, you probably want to aim for something unique, something that stands out from the crowd and tells the audience, hey, this is a character to pay attention to. What you really want to be paying attention to is silhouette or outline. Be reductive. Try to play Who's That Pokemon with your characters. Remove all the details. Just make it a shadow or an outline. Just leave the general shape. Can people still tell which character it is? In Yu Yu Hakusho, the answer is yeah, well enough. Human characters in this show don't have exaggerated physiques. We'll get to some of that when some of the more supernatural characters show up, but they do have strong outlines that are great for expressive animation. There are a few repetitive qualities among the main cast of characters. For one, everyone seems to have upturned noses. They're all pointed in the same angle. Kuwabara has a fun little boxy nose, but everyone else has the exact same nose. That's hardly a deal breaker, but it is indicative of artists falling onto habits. Going back to Kuwabara, he is easily the most visually distinct regulars on the show. Different nose, longer face, giant chin, he sticks out like a sore thumb among everyone else. For everybody else, the most visually defining traits they have are their hair and clothes. The three main women characters we've been introduced to so far wear their hair differently. Botan keeps hers in a ponytail, Keiko has these pigtails going on, she even wears them to bed, and Yusuke's mother wears her hair down. Also kimono, school uniform, street clothes. They are visually distinct and could at least be identified from each other if they were put in a silhouette. Another way to make the main characters pop out from the crowd is emphasizing features from the main characters and de-emphasizing those features for minor characters. For example, main characters in Yu Yu Hakusho have huge, expressive eyes, some the size of dinner plates. I mean, that's pretty typical of anime, but when you compare them to secondary characters like Kuwabara's gang or Kiko's friends, they're not quite as big, not quite as expressive, not quite as colorful. And then with the one-and-done no-name characters, the background characters, like the gang that jumps Kuwabara in the second half of the episode, their eyes are tiny, they're barely there at all. Importance of character is communicated by character design. The show is building a visual language for itself. Next, we have color. Giving a character a consistent color palette is a great way to give your character identifiers. Take your favorite comic book superhero, distill them down to just their primary color palette, and there's a good chance you'll be able to identify them just from that. The main characters in Yu Yu Hakusho are similar. Each have a couple of primary colors that are identifiably theirs, usually that of hair and clothes. Yusuke has his pitch black hair and green school uniform, Kuwabara has bright red hair and a blue uniform, Keiko's brown and blue, Botan blue and pink. Try it. Put these two colors together, hair color on top, uniform color on bottom, and ask somebody which Yu Yu Hakusho character this is. They'll almost certainly get it in one. The show actually proves how easily distilled these characters are visually in their little mid-episode bumpers, where they show our main characters as tiny little chibi sprites. These two aren't in the show yet, so let's just ignore them for now. The fact that you're able to distill these characters down to this, reducing the detail to almost nothing, and are still able to tell who these characters are from their general shape and color palette, show the visual strength of the character design. I don't want to oversell it. I don't think Yu Yu Hakusho is exceptionally good in this department, but it is good enough. It is perfectly efficient character design for this mass-marketed TV show for kids. Finally, let's talk about posture in brief. Posture is how a character holds themselves, how they stand, how they walk, how they gesture, their typical body language. Of course, that's often situational, but in a vacuum, how does a character, say, sit in a chair? Back straight, slouched forward, leaning back? Are their legs together, apart, crossed? How a character holds themselves can be used as a signifier. It can tell us things about that character. Botan doesn't really care that much about the episode's conflict. She's pretty much above it all and remains constantly relaxed and aloof. Yusuke is constantly frustrated and sits in a tense crouch, legs folded under each other, arms either crossed or pressing down on his knees. Keiko sleeps snugly in bed, flat on her back. She's so in control of her life that she even sleeps in a professional manner. Yusuke's mother gets drunk and falls asleep in a heap. Her life is a mess, and that's shown in her posture. And posture is kind of what I find disappointing about this episode specifically, because Yusuke possesses Kuwabara's body, and nothing changes. There's absolutely no visual tell that this character isn't Kuwabara anymore. Of course, his shape wouldn't change into Yusuke's, and given the story, there's no time for him to change into Yusuke's colors. But what you can do, and what this episode opts not to do, is have Kuwabara mirror Yusuke's posture. We never see Kuwabara do that tense sitting thing Yusuke's been doing for most of the episode, which at this point in the series is Yusuke's most distinct posture. I feel this is important because the conflict here is that Yusuke has to convince people who he really is despite being in Kuwabara's body. It's an identity crisis, but it's not shown to us through visual storytelling. When he finally finds Keiko, he instead opts to make a move that wasn't telegraphed through posture and is kind of cultural differency.
Keiko, nice uniform! That's so squishy!
Just K, you jerk!
Japan, goddamn.
I know. And it's not just your stupid gags or how you laugh. There's ways you move and speak that in 100 years I wouldn't forget.
But what are those ways? We never see Kuwabara adopt Yusuke's posture. You can't just say it's the way you move and not show us the way he moves. This is a textbook example of telling and not showing. She might as well have said, I can just sense your aura, for all it meant to the audience. Character design is important because, among a million other things, character design informs character. And for a brief moment, the show opts not to engage with those aspects, to ignore the fact that anime is visual storytelling. I mean, it's hardly a deal breaker. This episode is pretty fun, and this one slip up doesn't ruin that fun. But weak moments like this are incredibly easy to make. I've done this kind of thing in my own works like a dozen times. The key is to know the tools you have available to you and how to use them. Character design in all its facets is one such tool. One we'll be pulling out from time to time as this series goes along. Oh, yeah, right. Yusuke saved his body, so that's good. See you next time.